All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Um, thank you guys so much for coming. So it looks like right now we have around 15 people on, make that 16. So we're just getting started. My name's Peja, and I am the humanities librarian at the library. And yeah, we're really excited to do this like zine workshop with LA Zine Fest virtually. I think it's gonna be really fun. Tiffany just mentioned another librarian that she hasn't created a zine before. I haven't either, so it'll be fun to learn how to make zines. So yeah, this is a collaboration between Los Angeles Zine Fest, the library, and you may also be familiar if you're part of the LA campus community with the One Campus, One Book program. And so, you know, given that we're in a time right now where you might be going through a lot of different experiences, one of the highlights of the book that we read in the fall, Diary of a Reluctant Dreamer, was, you know, expressing yourself through visual um, art. So this is sort of a way to give you an opportunity to do that yourself. All right, next slide, please. So like I said, why a zine workshop? This is a cover of Diary of a Reluctant Dreamer. It was a graphic novel. It's a way to visually express yourself, right? And have or find a voice. It's also just fun. You can learn about zines and all about zine publishing. So yeah, it's just something we wanted to sort of close out the One Campus, One Book academic year with virtually. So I wanted to take a quick poll of the student or of everyone in the room. Um, just a couple brief questions. So I'm going to send that to you now. Awesome. So it looks like 6 of 15 have voted. Have some students, some community members. And if you haven't completed that, I'll give you another 10 seconds for the poll. All right. So I'm just going to share the results with you. So it looks like some students, a mixture of all. All right. Give me one moment. And if you could go to the next slide, please. All right. So just in terms of meeting norms, so your mics are muted. If you want to share your zines at any point or your video, you're welcome to. And then if you have a question, you're welcome to type it in the chat. You can also raise your virtual hand. So if you haven't used that before, there's a way that you can, in the participant window, you can actually raise your virtual hand. Just make sure that you lower it, right? You have to press the button again to lower it, because if you don't press the button again, it'll actually just stay raised. All right, next slide, please. All right, and then also throughout this, you're welcome to share your zines with us. So you can email me. My email address is written there with photos of your zines, and we are hoping to store those in a digital place, and you'll be able to access those maybe through special collections. But it's just a way for us to see what kind of zines you created and share them with everyone. All right, and from there I'll turn it over to the LA Zine Fest.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi everybody. I'm Daisy. If Rhea and Roxy can raise their hands so you all can see that there's 3 of us here that are organizers. Roxy and myself have been organizing for a few years, and Rhea, as well as Bianca, who's not here, but Rhea is one of the original co-founders of LA Zine Fest, so she's been involved since the beginning. I'm just going to, I don't know if anybody or how many of y'all have actually participated or done any zines, or if anybody wants to talk about what they think a zine is. Well, I don't know, a lot of you don't have screens. It's always a tough question.
I see some homies in here. Maybe, I don't know, Ziba, not to put you on the spot, but I know you could like, you know, like low key like to be put on the spot. If you could maybe just say hello and share what your experience with zines is.
Hello.
Maybe to start us off.
Yeah, hello, thank you. I'm Ziva. This is my home zine library. I made it 40 days ago as a collection of zines that I got from some of my travels in Mexico City. I get zines in Spanish. And then I make zines. I do a Zebra Radar zine. I was at the first LA Zine Fest in 2012 exhibiting a Zebra Radar zine at the last bookstore. And then since then, I'm a zine librarian with the City of Los Angeles Public Library. So with the partnership, we get zines circulating for free with your library card. Once our branches are open again, you can request zines to be sent to your local library. We have 73 libraries, and you can get them from the catalog. You can look up the titles and the zine stirs and subjects, and there's even an image of the zine cover, and you can submit your zine. That's all.
Thank you, Ziba. And this is probably a good time just to remind everyone, even though we're not sharing physical space together, we should definitely respect the fact that we are in a room together. So let's just communicate when we're unmuting our mics, and when someone's speaking, let's just respect that. Does anyone else have experience with zines or not have experience with zines and are interested in sharing a little something about that? You could raise your digital hand if you click on participants down below. And there's a little button that says raise hand, so we know that you're interested in sharing something. This is our first Zoom workshop, and it's like, we're learning.
Okay, well, I think, you know, if anybody's not familiar with zines, I brought some zines to share just so anybody can have an idea of what they look like. There are some that are very small. These are called, I don't know, mini zines, macro zines. It's still, I believe, 8 pages, but it's very, very tiny. It fits in the palm of your hand. There are photo zines that people make. They can be zines that are just with language, you know, there's poetry, there's educational zines, there's how-to zines. This one's about consent. And then I thought I'd share this one because it's a guide to being alone. I think this is like maybe a cool one to share during this pandemic when we're all just sort of like figuring out how to cope with not having to go outside or limited experiences with other people that we're used to spending time with. But I don't know which ones Roxy and Rhea brought to share really quick with everybody.
Yeah, I brought one that I ordered in the mail since this quarantine started, because let's see, I got in the mail a zine. It's a big one. Woo. Okay, it's a large one. And this one's called Triggered, Everyday Reaction to Previous Trauma. And this is made by Avi Jeter out of the Bay Area, I believe. And this is a really good, just gonna show a couple pages. It's illustration, but it's also a story. There's just, this is an example of kind of a large zine. It's a comic person who also makes political zines, perzines. Perzine means like a personal zine. And they also sent me a couple stickers that they made, which is really cute. So yeah, I wanted to share that. Did you have one, Roxy, you wanted to?
Yeah, I did. So I brought out zines that I've actually made. This is one of the first zines that I actually made. It's called Curvy Cuties. And I made it kind of out of, well, it's like another example of like an 8-page zine. Oh yeah, spoiler warning, there's going to be some tasteful nudity throughout these pages. Yeah, so it's just another 8-page zine that I actually scanned some of my sketches of figure drawings into, and I did use a combination of like photocopying and using design programs. I used InDesign to put this together, and kind of I yeah, I just kind of collaged everything together. So yeah, I've made about like 5 issues of these. All come in a different color. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, Roxanne, my question, we were privately chatting, was just where do you guys buy your zines at? Because I think Ria, you were talking about where you bought some during this time.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll say that we're gonna dive into that when we're doing like some zine history. So maybe now's a good time for Daisy to just kind of introduce what this workshop is gonna consist of.
Yeah, so we already did like a really basic intro of, you know, the organizers and LA Zine Fest and zines, and now we're gonna move into a slideshow where Ria and I will be handing off the mic, so to speak, depending on the slides that show up. And then after that, Roxy will do a quick how-to zine tutorial. And then there'll be a short brainstorm session. And then after that, we'll get into zine making. And hopefully, I don't know if anybody would like to share their zines that they've made or their ideas, we can do that as well. So I'm just going to share my screen again, really quickly. So we're going to talk about zines and zine culture and the history of zines. And this is just a slideshow of all of our art from previous years. What we usually do is we select a community member that's a part of the zine community to do our art. That's why they all look so different, because each year we have a different creator make the zine flyer. All right, so just gonna get into it. So the mimeograph is something that was comparable to a copy machine in 1856, and that's what the copy machines and newspapers and pamphlets and information was produced in that way before in the 1800s. I just inserted these photos to show what it looks like as it's being printed. It's printed on a stencil, and even like Andy Warhol created some of these for his artwork. During the late 1800s and the women's suffrage movement, women used pamphlets and I guess zine-like materials to get the right to vote for women and just share information about, like, you know, having more rights for women, voting, changing the marriage bar, all of that stuff. And Ria's gonna jump on this one.
Yeah. So we've kind of already touched on the fact that zines are handmade publications, and they're usually cheaply produced. They are usually, as we have experienced through creating a Zine Fest, where people come together and share their work in person. Zines are, you know, really, there's a big emphasis on community and emphasis on people coming together, whether it be in person or online or however we can, to circulate media that is in resistance to the mainstream, and that's in resistance to ways that mainstream media often silences voices, often makes space for certain voices. Traditionally, I mean, very heavily, mainstream media is dominated by white voices. And so zines are very much in response to that, pushing back, you know, creating space for individuals and others, and changing things. So this is an example. You know, the word zine is not necessarily something that dates back as far as a publication like this, the North Star, which was started in 1847 and ran until 1851. But this was an anti-slavery newspaper published by abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who's pictured right there. And when it started, it was 4 pages long, and it had a new issue that came out weekly. And by the end of its publication, it would reach 4,000 readers weekly in the US, Europe, and the West Indies. So this is definitely an example of finding the means and the tools and the resources in order to disseminate information that is extremely critical to revolution. So next slide.
Oops.
So VEDM magazine was published in 1942 to 1944, and this is fascinating. This was a Czech language magazine that was secretly written and distributed by young boys ages 13 to 16 years old who lived in the Terezin concentration camp during the Holocaust. They were all handwritten, and some of the young people would find ink, like old typewriters that didn't work. They would take the ribbons out of the typewriters. They would figure out how to create pens, and they would make usually 1 copy or 2 copies of each magazine, and they would get passed around to kids living in this concentration camp. And each issue contained poems, stories, comics, essays, and certainly useful survival information. And all of these that we're mentioning right now I would recommend jotting them down, doing more research on the histories of these, because these are really examples that are really critical to laying the foundation of zines and small-based press. So we can go to the next slide.
So one of the first zine discoveries occurred about around the 1930s, and they were essentially sci-fi fanzines, and it was called Comet, which is the first one in this series of photographs. It's called the Comet, and that was based in Chicago, and they just got together, had these like discussion groups about sci-fi, fiction, fantasy, and that's when the fanzine genre developed. I sort of put this slide in here because I thought it was kind of like an interesting thing to note the power of zines or like self-published works, is that, you know, in the 1960s when Star Trek was going to be or almost canceled, all of the people that really loved Star Trek, they submitted fanzines to like the to the network, and it actually saved Star Trek from being canceled. Zines, powerful, powerful things. And then the next slide, if it decides to come. Then in the 1960s and the 1970s, the Black Panthers definitely utilized pamphlets to disseminate information because, you know, at that time, that's when the African American communities were being brutalized by police. And so they found the best way to communicate with each other in a safe way was by distributing pamphlets amongst the community.
And these are some examples of issues of the Black Panther newsletter. So it began as a 4-page newsletter and expanded to a newspaper. It started in Oakland, California, founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. It was the main publication for the Black Panther Party. And from 1968 to 1971, it was the most widely read Black newspaper in the United States, and it had a circulation of more than 300,000. Next slide. Gidra, this was a self-proclaimed voice of the Asian American movement. It was a revolutionary monthly newspaper magazine. So this started from 1969 and it was published until 1974. It was started by students at UCLA. It was an outspokenly anti-war, anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist newspaper. There were 60 issues that were published in total, and it was brought back in 1990 and then brought back again in 2000 to 2004 to commemorate its legacy. And the entire collection of this newspaper is available to download online. So I would definitely recommend looking that up, checking it out. College students created it, and it's got gorgeous images as well.
Thanks, Ria. And then continuing with the 1970s, this is like when the punks and the DIY movement sort of emerged. And throughout this time, I would say that probably like the music and the fanzines were the ones that, the genres that developed. And so it was just like to commemorate all the grunge-giness of that time, the music, the anarchy, you know, all that stuff. And then in the 1990s, we had the Riot Girl and the third wave feminism that sort of came out. And I feel like this was very powerful and important because at this time, girls started forming their own bands. They were fighting sexism, the patriarchy, reproductive rights. And throughout this movement, I think I read a fact somewhere or an approximation that about 40,000 Riot Girl zines were published and distributed.
And these are a couple examples of Riot Girl zines. And I think it's also important to note how, you know, these are little pinpoints in kind of like self-publishing and what would be known as zine history. This is certainly not like the ultimate. There are so many other, and this is also a very like US centric slideshow that we're sharing. So there's like so many other zines and ways that folks all around the world have created DIY publications. And it's important to note how these are all kind of in conversation with one another, and the zines that are created like build this larger story. So Riot Girl, also it's important for us to be critical of these publications and these moments as well, as much as we embrace them. So there, as much as there are Riot Girl zines that were created in resistance to patriarchy, there were also zines created that were critical of Riot Girl, of being very centered on white women, very centered on cisgendered women, very centered on a particular class of people who were able to wedge their foot in the door and, you know, disrupt the mainstream. And so these conversations continue on, which is why zine making and zine histories are so important to build upon and to share with each other, learn about, you know, what do you know about, I'm sure there's so many small publications that are, you know, maybe coming to your mind that haven't been touched on here. So we can go to the next slide. So Zine Fest, we mentioned briefly our events where folks come together, usually in person, to exchange ideas, to sell and trade their work, and to build community and yeah, knowledge share. There are a list of, a lot of these are local-ish or Southern California, some Tijuana, but there are Zine Fests in pretty much every state. I would probably say at this point there might be a Zine Fest in every state in the U.S. There's certainly many in Southern California. Some are comics centric. Others are focused on. There's a Zine Fest in Oakland that's based on personal zines, and yeah, it would be great if you know, screenshot this, do some research on Zine Fest, because yeah, you could always table at one. And I think Tiffany was asking about where zines can be purchased, which is a great question. And so in general, and I think even now, there are some bookstores that, local bookstores that will sell you zines. I think Other Books is another, there it is on there. So Zine Consignment means that you create a small publication, you bring it to either an online seller or a bookstore, and generally you'll give them a small quantity of your zines, and they'll take a percentage, usually about between 40 and 60% of whatever sells, and will pay you for the other percentage. And that's traditionally a really great way locally to distribute your zines. There's also a lot of people sell zines on sites like Etsy or through Instagram. Has been a big way that I am able to locate people's zines and buy them directly from people. There's also something called zine distros, which are kind of like online zine shops that usually a collective or a couple people will put together. And usually those are curated selections of zines. And also there's, you know, I've often left zines in public spaces just for people to find. And zine libraries, you can also get zines at the LA Public Library, like Ziba mentioned. And does Cal State L.A. have a zine library? I don't know.
Not yet. I know we've been talking about it, and I think we're hoping to have students, we were going to have like the in-person event, donate them to our special collections, right, Azalea?
Yes. So currently we don't have any zines in our special collections, but we do want to build one, as Tiffany mentioned, with students. So hopefully through this workshop that would inspire some students, and hopefully they can donate it to us, or a digital copy at least. That would be great. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And there's also a class where we're hoping to get some zines donated that way, an English class. So I don't know if any of you are from the English class, but we are welcoming donations for that as well.
Nice. Applied to LA Zine Fest, yeah. So now I want to speak a little bit to where we're at this year and just acknowledge this time. Which we're all kind of like, you know, attempting some days normalizing it in our minds, other days not so much. And so the LA Zine Fest for this year, 2020, and also I just want to mention that all of us who put this together were volunteers, we're friends who just wanted to get people together to share their work, and you could make a Zine Fest too if you wanted. Just want to make sure to say that. And reach out to us if you want some tips or hear about our experiences. But the Zine Fest for 2020 was anticipated to happen on May 30th. Who knows? What is time? It's not happening. So it was definitely hashtag canceled. And however, we are, while we are not attempting to replicate the Zine Fest digitally, because I really believe in the significance of a Zine Fest. Having those face-to-face interactions are really what people value. So while we can't replicate that online, we are hosting a series of events over the next couple of weeks that are going to provide an opportunity to learn more about some of the people that would have been exhibiting at the Zine Fest this year, and also a chance for those folks to host panel talks, do readings, and some tutorials and workshops as well. So I know, for instance, we have one person who is hosting a workshop about how to draw people who are different from you, who don't look like you. There is someone who's going to be, we're also doing like zine kind of studio visits with folks who are going to make videos about how they're spending their quarantine time, productive days, non-productive days. It's also like super important to acknowledge how not being productive is not something to shame yourself for. I know a lot of people were really looking forward to creating a lot of work to share at the Zine Fest, and feel now like maybe, the time now is just to maybe doodle on a Post-it note for an hour and cry, and that's your day, and that's totally fine. So I think that these events are going to provide space for us to just share how we're all coping and taking care of ourselves, taking care of community. We have a mutual aid form going around amongst people who were going to be participating at LA Zine Fest 2020, trying to share with each other what our needs are, what resources we have to share with each other. And I mention that because I just want to emphasize how much creating zines is also about creating and nurturing community. And so if you are feeling isolated, bored, uninspired, and you want to tap into connecting with folks, I definitely recommend either reading a zine, learning more about zines, buying zines, making one, and just starting to share. That is all for that, I think.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about why we feel zines are important. So throughout zine history and zine culture, for me, it like mostly is really important, I feel, because it just gives voices to all the voices that are typically dismissed in mainstream media. And I feel like that's a really powerful thing to remind people that they have the ability to be heard, they have the ability to be seen. I feel like that's really wonderful and necessary. But and all of these sort of go one in hand together. Like, they provide a sense of community. I've had people share with me that literally a zine that they came across during like a very specific, challenging time in their life, like literally saved their life, and then that's like, to me, shows the impact of zines and zine community. And throughout it all, it's also very important to have the accessibility to share resources and knowledge with each other. And I feel like throughout the pandemic that we're all experiencing right now, I feel like we're being reminded that, how much we can support each other with just sharing resources and knowledge, even if it's not specifically through zines. But I feel like at the core of zines, it's like, that's just what we want to do. We just want to find like-minded individuals. We just want to connect with other people that share our experiences. Or if somebody wants to become more familiar with my experience, it's also nice to have, that kind of connection too. I don't know if Ria or Roxy want to talk a little bit about why they feel zines are important besides what's on this slide here. No?
I could speak a little bit about that. I mentioned before when we and Daisy, Ria, and myself were showing some of our favorite zines or zines that are important to us, that I made one of my first zines, Curvy Cuties. For those of you who weren't in the chat at that time, this is what it looked like. That I made it out of frustration, and at the time when I made it, I was growing kind of stagnant with my chosen career of being an illustrator, and when I started doing, I actually came across one of the founders of Zine Fest, and when I did and our friendship kind of led to me volunteering for the first Zine Fest at the last bookstore in 2012, I believe. And all that kind of kind of inspired me to make my own zines, and it kind of inspired me to keep going and keep creating art and illustration. And their focus on visibility of like marginalized voices kind of inspired me to make Curvy Cuties, because I felt a lack of visibility of of plus size bodies, particularly plus size bodies of people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, and people. There was a lack of people who didn't look like there. I was just like there weren't enough plus size people in the body positivity movement that looked exactly like me. So that kind of inspired me to start to challenge myself to draw more, not only draw more plus size bodies in my artwork, but draw more marginalized bodies within my work. So if you just want to see a couple of examples of that, I have like a couple examples like of this right here. This is from my third volume of Curvy Cuties. So yeah, that's pretty much like what I've been kind of like, that's been like a through line throughout my time. Whenever I make a zine, I'm like, okay, like what can I make visible, or what can I kind of bring to the forefront through my ability to make art. So yeah.
Thanks, Roxy.
Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next slide. I wanted to include Yumi Sakugawa because I feel like she's sort of the unicorn of the zine community, because she first started with this I Think I'm in Love with You zine several years ago that since then has been turned into a book, and she's been one of the zinesters that has been able to be successful. She does like meditation workshops and all these things, but she has had a lot of zines that have been turned into published books, and I feel like that's a really beautiful thing. And I feel if I'm remembering the way that she shared this experience, is I know that she had her first zine, I think I'm from at Zine Fest, and just from showing her work and building those connections, she was able to find a publisher, not specifically at Zine Fest, but it led to that opportunity. And I feel like that's really cool. And I've heard lots of different stories from people that have been able to, like illustrators or graphic designers, that they've been able to build connections that have improved or enhanced their career. So I think that's really awesome.
Daisy, we have a question from
Okay.
What's the difference between a zine and a book? I don't know if you want to speak to that.
A zine, I think, is essentially a self-published work. The content doesn't necessarily have to be, books and zines can have similar content, but like if you have a piece of writing or a piece of literature or a drawing, a series of drawings or photos that's like published by Penguin Books, then that doesn't really qualify as a zine because it's being produced by someone else other than you. So to me, a zine is something that's put together by the individual, usually from beginning to end. So they're their own editor, they make their own proofs, they go through everything on their own. Sometimes there are zines that have a spine, so I don't think that's a good way to differentiate a zine or a book, because there are some zines that are like maybe art zines that are a little bit thicker that might require some sort of spine, and there are definitely different sources that you can use online to print out potentially to make a really large volume zine. So not all zines are just like 8 pages. There are zines that are like 70, 80 pages out there too. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I can't see the checkbox.
I would also say that that's a very well put description, Daisy, by the way. I would describe it the exact same way. But whenever people ask that question, I kind of leave it up to them through like their experience and their research of to figure out what that difference is to them. For example, I just kind of want to highlight, I know everyone could see it in the chat right now, Ziva said like their answer was ISBN, which is I believe it's just like the code for library books, correct? Right? So
I don't know. I will rebuke that comment because sometimes I make my photo zines at Kinko's or whatever, and so there's no ISBN, but I at some point did use this like online website called MagCloud that I submitted like my layout and my photos and all of that stuff, and when they delivered my zines to me, those did have some sort of like barcode on them. So for me, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a zine. I mean that it's a book, just because it has a barcode that this website, I don't know why they felt that it was necessary to put barcodes on the thing, but it's just like, I don't know. But I think we should move on because we could talk about this for 10 minutes, I swear. Barcode, no barcode, but I feel like essentially it's a self-published work, or it's a self-published work. If you didn't self-publish it, then it's a little bit more difficult to call it a zine. The next slide is just to showcase this really wonderful resource called Stolen Sharpie Revolution. I don't know how many editions there are. I think there might be 2. But if you are interested in learning more about zines, I think there's a website, but this is a really good resource of like the different ways that you can make your zine, who you can, where you can find information. And Alex Reck she was one of the organizers for Portland Zine Symposium, and she's the one that created this Stolen Sharpie Revolution book. So I would definitely put this on your to buy or like to research list if you're interested in learning more about zines and zine culture. I just put this slide in here about Kanye West tweeting about zine and how it's pronounced zine, short for magazine. A lot of people do pronounce it wrong. And the background image of the tweet is actually a zine that he made for his like fashion lookbook. And so I think it's interesting that zines can potentially have that flexibility as well to be used in a more like high fashion, high art sort of way. They're not always used that way, but there are art zines that can be really beautiful and end up being kind of pricey because they were Rizzoed or they were the letterpress that they used or all the color, you know. But to me, it just shows the viability of zines and how, you know, flexible they are and how you can really use them in lots and lots of different ways. Like you can just make a zine full of pretty pictures, you know, that can be called a fashion lookbook if you wanted to.
I just noticed that someone in here, Christina, raised their hand.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was trying to catch that very last scene you guys shared before the Kanye thing, but I don't have a chat. So for some reason I can't chat or like submit a question, so I figured I'd raise my hand. Thank you for that.
No problem.
It's called Stolen Sharpie Revolution. It's handheld. It's very small. I think there's a couple of different. I think there's Stolen Sharpie. This one's the original, and I think there might be a second one that just has more information. I'm pretty sure you could buy it online. If you do buy, you'll be supporting Alex, who's great. She's really wonderful. Yeah.
Do you know if like the guy who created the Post Secrets and kind of put them together, if that was a zine first or if it was like a published book?
I feel I'm not familiar with him and his work, but I feel like it's probably just something that was picked up and turned into a book. But I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's great stuff, though. I'm enjoying it.
And so zine, I don't know. People pronounce it Zine, which is inappropriate. But it's also okay. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I don't have the heart to correct anybody. I'm just like, sure, it's a Zine. That's cool. And this is just like a quick list of more resources for zines and zine culture. Broken Pencil is really good. But, you know, you can either just take a screenshot of this because these all have like really lots and lots of information about zines and publishing and all of that stuff.
Hi, I also saw that Tiffany had a question. Tiffany, what was your question?
Not a question, but just sorry the chat isn't working. We're aware of it and we are trying to fix it for the people who it's not working for. So are you okay with people just speaking when they have questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been monitoring the chat in the participants area, so just
it seems like people randomly can't chat. Like I logged in and it worked again, so I don't know.
Okay.
I just wanted to let you guys know.
All right. As long as you guys are able to raise your hands, I should be able to see it. We'll be able to see it, I think.
Thank you all. Sorry, we had a non-friendly participant earlier in the meeting, and I think some settings got wonky.
Everyone's getting hacked. Okay.
So that's it for this portion of the slideshow. I think Roxy was going to take over and do the zine tutorial.
Did Azalea want to highlight the survey one more time and where people could possibly email their work to?
I think that's at the end.
Oh, at the very, very end. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you'd like, I'll just drop my email address in the chat. Let's see. I guess some of you don't have chat. So we'll share that toward the end. Try to figure out a way to do that.
All right, cool. All right, so, hi. My name is Roxy for everyone that didn't catch it before. And I'm about to show you just one of the easiest ways to create a zine. So it's known as an 8-page zine. And okay, so here you go.
Oh, and Roxy, maybe just before you start, if folks have a piece of paper handy or were prepared with one and a pair of scissors, now would be the time to like kind of follow along with Roxy.
Yeah. All right, perfect. All right, so usually you can just use 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, also known as a letter size. It should have this kind of proportion. So take your piece of paper. Everybody can hear my voice behind the paper, right? Okay, so what you do is you fold it in half in what we like to call hamburger style. So you fold it in half like this. So one thing to know as you're making folds throughout this endeavor, it's always best to make sure that all your folds are as creased as possible, just so it's easier for your zine to lay flat. Okay, so then you fold it once more, another hamburger style, in half like this. Give her 1 second. Okay. All right, and then, so what we're going to do now is hamburger style one more time. So, then you're done. It should come out to be like this size right now. All right. Cool. All right. So the next step is to just unfold or not everything, but just unfold it once actually. And you'll see that you have like four little pages showing on each side, like that. And I'm actually going to take another piece of paper that I actually did this run through on, where you actually are going to use your scissors. So I'm going to put this down. And so where you see the very first fold that you did around here, also known as, you can call it a spine if you want, around here, you're going to make a cut into your piece of paper from the spine to like the center. So if you can cut it from the spine to the center of where all the four kind of corners meet. Well, so then now you should have a little mouth right there. Wait till everyone's done with cutting.
So there was a question, so closed side to center from Rochelle?
Side to center.
Oh yeah, closed side. I think that's the same as spine side. Yeah.
Oh,
Close to side.
Center. I was like, wait, I'm not sure about the vocabulary. Sorry. Okay, so after you have made a cut, you unfold it all the way. So it looks like a little mouth in front of you, right? And then you do a hot dog style fold, which is like this, because usually sandwiches don't look like that, so we call it a hot dog style. And you make a motion, you push the pages together like this, and this should start to kind of form like a cross section like this. Makes sense? Yeah, okay. And then you can either fold it either way. And I'm just gonna fold it like this. You can fold it like this one last time. And once again, make sure that all your folds are as creased as possible, just so there's less of a chance of kind of looking janky, but it's totally fine because it's a zine. So it should come out looking something like this. Once you have the cross, when it looks like a cross, and then you fold one of the top sides together on itself.
I wanted to mention that I'm gonna put in the chat a link to our website resources page that we have that has a PDF, a downloadable PDF of instructions of this and a template. Oh, whoops, let me send it to everyone.
Okay. Did anybody want me to repeat a step or have any questions about this tutorial?
I have a question. So like so you make zines. Do you always use new paper, or have you ever like repurposed something like a newspaper to create what you're making?
From my recollection, I've usually just used like new paper, just because like yeah, I just always use like new pieces of paper to create a zine. I've also made other zines that are not, they're just like a regular staple bound book or little zine or whatever, and I've used that. But a lot of times I'll use my scratch paper to make proofs of zines, so they don't go to waste all the time.
Cool. Thanks so much, Roxy.
No problem.
I know we have a, we're gonna put one more link in the chat to a video that you could watch at some point that just shares someone's experience getting their zine ready for a fest and attending an LA Zine Fest. It's a few-minute video. There'll be time in the next 10 minutes or so that we're gonna start working on some stuff. So that might be a good time to watch that to get inspired, or just to learn a little bit about a zine creator and what's possible. But before we jump into that, I know that we have librarians, we have potentially some professors in here, we have some students, some community members, and I just wanted to see if anyone is interested in sharing either what brought them to a zine workshop, what ideas they have for creating a zine, perhaps if this is something that is part of a class, maybe speaking a little bit to what that is, or even just like, what is your quarantine situation like? We just really wanted to give some space for us to communicate with one another. So if anyone is open to that, you could do the raise hand button. Super encourage it. Anita.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I want to say thank you to our librarian, Kendall, for inviting us. I'm in the Latino, Latina Studies department. And I, love zines. I love the political impact and like history of them, the queer story, the mujer story. And I think I teach Chicana Latino social movements. And I'm interested in my students doing zines for either class projects, or this semester I gave it as one of the options for our final projects. As you all know, people are just struggling to like show up these days sometimes, and everybody's going through a variety of challenges. So I wanted to make sure that there was a creative option, but I do that all of the time. And so I just wanted to thank both the library and all of you panelists and artists for doing this work. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. That sounds really exciting and important. Thank you for being here. Do we have anyone else interested in sharing a little anything? I'll give it just a moment, maybe.
My perfectionism doesn't do well with zines sometimes or drawing. So I'm working on balancing that as I'm drawing right now. So I can share that too with you.
I was
I'm
gonna.
on my 3rd sheet of paper just in case we're keeping count.
Well, like I said before, those would be good pieces of paper to make proofs with. I would definitely say making zines is definitely a process of unlearning your perfectionism. That's another great reason why I have invested so much in the zines, just kind of dismantle that drive to just make everything align and everything.
So I'm thinking we're gonna.
Sorry,
yeah,
I wanted to
sure.
add a little bit
Please.
to what Anita was saying for their students. You know, I didn't do like a workshop for a Pacoima charter school, high school, but what I did was the teacher asked me to supply her class with a zine library for a couple of weeks or a couple of months while their kids worked on developing their zine projects. And I wanted to ask you, Anita, if you wanted me to share some of the zines that the students made, because I think they're really beautiful and they're really touching. And maybe that could be a good source to provide inspiration for your students, since they're seeing like other students that sort of have had, you know, the opportunity to make zines and what can potentially come of it.
Absolutely. I would love that. That would be really generous. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's just a few pictures, and I can even share with you like what the instructor's experience was. You know, I feel like there's always, I don't know, high schools, well, when we were high school students, I feel like we just relate more to other students, right? So even though we might think it's cool, we won't really act on it until we actually see it. But I'd be happy to share that with you. Just like if you want to privately send me your email address, and then I can connect with you that way.
I would love that. I don't know that I can chat, but I can maybe get in touch with you through our librarian.
Yeah, that works too.
That would be awesome. And I know that several of our colleagues in my department have done zines, and so that's a great idea. I know that there's some virtual libraries. You might have mentioned them earlier, but I would love to see what folks have done. You know, you included Daisy. Like, it's a very generous offer. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And there's one question that came in that is important to acknowledge, I think, about would it be a zine if it were made on Microsoft Word, for example? And I think that's a good point to bring up, especially now that, yes, definitely, like the tools that you have. To me, defining zines is very much about utilizing the resources that you have available to you. And either what you have access to or what inspires you, or a combination of those. And so creating something digitally is certainly something we're spending a lot of time on our computers these days. And so these are really an example of the tools we have available to us. So I think we're going to take maybe about like 20 minutes, I think, or so. And I think if we're open to it, spending just a little time, if you have some writing prompts you're thinking about getting to, if you want to doodle, if you want to start working on something, or just reflections for a moment, we're gonna kind of meet back up at, I guess, 1 o'clock in 20 minutes, and maybe check in with one another, see if anyone is interested in sharing what they're working on. It's interesting to do this in this type of space, because this is usually the point in our face-to-face workshops where, you know, people are chatting with one another, getting to know each other, sharing, and we're kind of walking around. But this will be kind of a different isolation-based example of that. I know for me, I've been kind of avoiding writing about certain things. I've been some days emotions are coming up when it comes to feelings about what kind of world I want to be a part of and help to contribute to and create once we are able to be in community face to face with one another again. And sometimes I've been avoiding kind of dreaming that up because I want to stay very present in these lessons that are presenting themselves to us now in this quarantine. But I think I might spend the next 20 minutes kind of dreaming up some future world kind of stuff. And hopefully if anyone is a comics artist, you'll be doodling and drawing, and please feel free to communicate via chat, or if a question or something comes up in the next 20 minutes, pop your hand up. And so let's try this out. Yeah. All right.
So I see Rochelle has her hand up. If you want to go ahead.
How would you like decorate a zine?
I would say use whatever tools are at your disposal. I've used Sharpie, I've used highlighters, I've used a big pen to create zines, or at least like a draft of one. So like whatever drawing materials, or even any other kind of art making materials that you have at your disposal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you ever use like pieces of like magazines or anything, like little pictures? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You can definitely collage your zines if you wanted to. If you're someone who draws, you can make a drawing zine. If you're someone that wants to cut up a bunch of magazines and mix that in with your drawing, or with like poetry or your personal experience, you could definitely do that too. I feel like the beauty of zines is that there really isn't a correct, or there isn't really a wrong or right way to do it. Like whatever makes sense to you. Like if you're just vibing on collage materials, and that's just your zine, you know. Yeah, you can basically decorate it whichever way you want. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's cool. So for my class, I'm taking women's gender studies, and we're doing like a final project, and we have to do like one page on basically like a woman of color that's like contributed to Los Angeles. And then it's like, do you guys have like any like tips or something, like if you were to do a zine on another person?
Yeah, well, I feel like you could maybe just treat it as sort of like a biography, or it could be, you know, the zines that are dedicated to a specific person or persons or music, they're called fanzines. So maybe you can just talk about why this person is really influential and why they're impactful and why you relate, or why you find this person to be really amazing, and include stuff like that in the zine or in the one page. And then obviously if you want to include pictures of them, if you want to print stuff out that they did, photos of them, whatever, you can cut them out and then incorporate that into your page too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Daisy, how I feel like okay, I'm trying to compose my thoughts. So there's a big thing on Instagram yesterday because someone quoted Maya Angelou without citing her, you know, and taking works of women of color and not giving them credit. And so I think do you feel like it's still important within zine form? I mean, I do, but I guess you're hosting and like leading this, so I'm like throwing it to you for your thoughts on that, because I'm a librarian, so I'm like cite everything all the time.
Yeah,
so.
we definitely want to make sure that consent is always included in anything that we do. If we, like, even if we're trying to do our social media post, you know, and there's a person's face in it that maybe one of us knows, but if we can't figure out who this person is and we can't contact them to ask them for consent to share their image, then we don't usually do it. So we feel like it's really important to make sure, especially like, you know, in the history of marginalized voices, I feel like that's the easiest thing to do, and is to just reappropriate someone else's work and profit off of it when it was originally another person's idea. And within the patriarchy and all of that stuff, I feel like with women of color, it's just so easy to erase them. So we feel like it's really important to make sure that we do ask for consent all the time.
Tiffany, was your question also speaking to like the creation of a zine itself and citation practices within that?
Kind of like if I was inspired by, I'm not gonna be able to think anyone off the top of my head. Beyonce, that's the first one. So if I was inspired by her and I wanted to do a zine that was like based on how she made me feel, do you feel like it's still important to mention her in there, or is it because it's like the zine is more representative of my feelings, then would it not be necessary, I guess, to give her credit? That was a very out there example, but you know, not necessarily just like a biography about her in zine form, but something that's referencing her works.
I guess well, first want to just acknowledge that that's a really good question. Because zines are very much about exploration. And I know that there are zines that I've written 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 month ago, that document a period of time and growth for myself that I don't necessarily resonate with or associate with anymore. And so in some ways, it's a vulnerable place to be. And zine, in terms of like, you know, hosting a Zine Fest and welcoming folks to display their work there, we certainly aren't encouraging anyone to police anyone's work. However, I think that's also why, going back to that conversation about community is so important, because once you kind of start to get to know people's work, you kind of, you know, there's this kind of collective accountability of who you're surrounding yourself with, and best practices kind of start to form in that way, in terms of like what types of zines are you creating, and who are you citing and giving reference to, and are you giving this zine away for free, or are you profiting off of it? These are like, zines are also a beautiful way to ask yourself questions about your own privilege and your own intersections of identity. And so I think it's like your question is one that like brings up more questions. But I don't know if Ziba is around, if Ziba as a librarian would be interested in speaking to that, because Ziba has done a lot of work in bringing zines to the public library itself.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the more credit, the better, if included, if you can. If not, one of the very first zines I ever did at a public library, another zinester pointed out that, oh, you used a piece of my zine to make a zine review. Make sure you give me full credit with the link and the name and all this stuff, that since it was one of my first zines of that sort, I didn't know. So they helped me realize, yeah, as much as you can quote back to the original, if you have space, it's always good to include as much as you can.
Thank you for that.
I want to add to this too, just kind of like one more layer, because I know a lot of the students in the English department right now are working on basically editing or transcribing or copying some version of that. Of men who are incarcerated, right? And their poetry and their like interviews with them, or their way of expressing themselves through fiction or whatever it is. And so there was a question about, you know, how do you give credit to someone who, well, first of all, they might not want their name on it. So it's always like a question of like, oh, we'll just ask. But then how do you give credit to someone who doesn't necessarily have like a link or something? You just can use their own name. And then the question of like Creative Commons came up too, where have you ever seen zines include like a Creative Commons license where it means that it can only be redistributed for like non-commercial purposes? So that say like one of the poems got really popular and Time Magazine wanted to publish an article on it. Yeah, I'm just curious about that.
I'm trying to think if I've seen zines that have had that, but
like interviews or quotes, like direct.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure. It's a good question.
Oh, was that your zine that you shared, Christina?
I think they've left the chat.
She's coming back. Let me admit her. Mhm.
Christina, was that your zine that you just shared earlier?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I started working on it. And I was trying to figure out how to get to chat, and I guess it just shared it, and I pressed back and it kicked me out of the Zoom meeting when I pressed back.
We're all learning.
Indeed.
Welcome back.
I wanted to like just add the photo in the chat, but I don't know how it didn't do it. I'm not too good with this Zoom thing, and I'm on my phone, not on a computer. It's a little hard.
Would you be interested in talking a little bit about what you showed?
Yeah, it's just kind of like a feeling that I've been having of like having so much stuff lifted off in terms of worrying and stressing on the day-to-day, and kind of being grounded in a sense into like what's truly important. But at the same time, it's like my feelings are like so up in the air like a balloon, but sometimes they just feel so heavy. And I have like good stuff coming. I applied to grad school at Cal State L.A. and I was really happy to get in because I felt like I had spent all this time learning about the school and learning about myself, and now I'm in a place where I feel confident to like share and do more things, and so it feels good. But then there's still so much work to do. So as we've been doing the meeting, and like this concept was kind of in my head, and then I got the visuals, and I just pulled out some like Crayola markers, and I didn't fold the paper properly, but I just wanted to get it on paper.
Awesome. Wow. Yes, what you're saying definitely resonated a lot with me, and I'm sure others too. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Wanted to share this zine that I've been revisiting a lot the past couple of days, and also to show just how many different forms a zine can take shape and content. But this is Carolina Hicks is the name of the artist, and they go by Subtle Ceiling, SBTL_CLNG. Their Instagram is really beautiful explorations. But they had this little zine packet called Pain Magic, 4 micro zines, so 4 mini zines. And it came, I purchased it at a Zine Fest. It came in this little mini envelope right here. I spent $4 on it. And once you open that up, inside are just a number of tiny zines, and I'm going to open one up to share. So this one is called Pain Magic, and it's the same format that Roxy showed us. So it's that kind of 8-page zine with one sheet of paper, but this is just a very, very tiny piece of paper to really show that you can work with anything. And I'm going to just read this a little. The push and pull of every moment, stagnant or flowing, you're inside of it. Gravity in the context of space and time is known to cause pain. And they've got a little drawing. The strain. Alchemize your pain, use it as your fire. Burn the fog, accept the pain as your power. Subtle ceiling. And they've just got a bunch of little mini ones with kind of like little meditations exploring like our shadow selves, difficult emotions, change, recovery, healing. Yeah, these have meant a lot to me the past couple days.
So I can share, I think. Oh, I forgot to turn off my Zoom background, maybe. While I'm doing that, so I posted a link because I think the first time I made, I guess I didn't count it as a zine, going back to what a zine is or isn't. I did make a comic in college because I got to take this really cool seminar about it analyzed religion within comics. And so at the end of that, we had to make our own comic, which I guess could also be counted as a zine. I don't really care either way. But so I just posted a link to it, and it was about gluttony, I think. I'm like trying to remember now. And it was inspired by, I think, a more popular comic by, I want to say, Dark Horse that features horsemen, I think. I don't remember the name of it. So, but I've also been drawing like flowers because I miss hiking. So that was what I wanted to do. So those are my two sharing things. Also, I have these nifty new watercolor pens where I've learned I'm terrible with watercolor. So that may be my new project, is trying to get better with watercolor pens.
Daisy, haven't you been drawing too lately?
Yeah, I did. Like when I first started making zines, I made more illustration sketch zines, but since then I've just done photography zines. I just mostly make photography zines now because I shoot film. I'm a photographer, but yeah, I did draw some watercolors. I feel like watercolor pens are just, you don't have as much control with the water and the brush and how much it absorbs, so it's really tricky. I use watercolor pencils too, because I just like the texture that it gives, in addition to the really soft ethereal look with the pigments.
Yeah, I normally use microns, which again, I think goes back to the control thing, because I can draw very, which microns are like really thin pens. Is that how you would describe them? If
Yeah.
anyone hasn't.
Yeah, I was drawing the other day. I drew things that were outside, that live outside, like flowers and stuff.
So I'm just going to paste in the chat. Hopefully most of you can see it, but it's just a survey for today's event. So I don't want to disturb the creative juices and moments, but if you do have to leave early, then please complete that survey for us. It's just 4 questions. Thank you.
I wanted to share with everybody really quickly. I found this is like the very first zine that I ever made when I lived in San Diego many moons ago. And I feel like this is when I had already done all of the proofing that I wanted. I had already figured out all of my layout, but like it's everything's still pretty much like cut and paste. So like I copied the text and font that I wanted to use. I made copies of the photos that I wanted to use and I cut it out and I just like glued it onto my page. Like the back has, you know, everything sort of like loose because I made copies of the photos that I want. I just glued it. But everything's like pretty cut and paste. Like this is a sketch that I did in my sketchbook and I just made a copy of it and cut it out and put it in here. So I don't know, like this is what potentially zine making can look like if you don't want to necessarily just do it on a computer. But this is one way of putting together a zine. This is precious because it's my proof, my original. I found it when I moved and I was unpacking my stuff and but yeah, I just wanted to share. This is what potentially a zine could look like in the process. It doesn't have to be cute. It could just be messy, kind of falling apart. Yeah.
Thanks, Daisy.
Did anyone want to share in around share their zines around like maybe 110, or do you guys need to be need it to be pushed back a few more minutes?
I think 110 is good. I'm speaking for me, obviously, but
Cool.
I do have a question. So do people normally are zines normally a solo creation, or are there a lot of collaborative zines out there?
Yeah, there are a lot for sure. Actually, we do accept a number of people that group together as collectives, and they do produce zines that could also be considered a magazine, kind of like where they put out monthly or quarterly issues that feature different art and writing from most of the members of that specific collective. So yeah, they could definitely be very much collaborative.
All right, I can ask a million questions. So I know you guys, sorry, just trying not to use you guys anymore. You all created, are your zine creators yourself? Would you be willing to share, like, if you have your Instagram pages or something? Because I really appreciate you guys holding this workshop, and I just used it again. And so I would love to follow all of you if possible, if you're willing to share that.
Absolutely. I'll list my Instagram handle in the comments or in the chat.
Thank you.
Since we're going to start sharing, I didn't work on a zine right now, but I wanted to share, we didn't really talk too much about like printing or like different ways to print or produce a zine. And I feel like right now, or within the past couple of years, definitely there's been a rise in, I don't know, is it Rizzo or Rizzo? Rizzo?
Rizzo? I think it's
Yeah.
Rizzo.
Is it Rizzo? Okay, well, it's Rizzo printing, and it's similar to a copy machine, but it's not, because for each color that you use, you have to use a different drum, and you have to do it, print it in layers, as opposed to a copy machine that prints all the colors at once. So this is like a really beautiful Rizzo printed zine that's also considered a larger. It's not like a standard A5 zine, and this is a mix of, that's the only photo I think, but it's all drawing and illustration, and then just like the effect that it gives is really beautiful and soft. And there's different colors that you can use, but I feel like this is, and Tiny Splendor is the one that printed this one, who's, Cynthia, who's amazing. But I feel like also one thing to consider when producing your zine is you don't always just have to print it in black or on a copy machine. You can produce it in different ways too. There are people that, I feel that I've seen a completely silk screened zine where it's just made completely just from silk screens as well. But yeah, I just wanted to share, you know, a Rizzo printed zine for everybody, if there wasn't anybody that was familiar with that kind of printing.
That's great. Thank you, Daisy. Would anyone like to share what they've created during the space of this workshop? I'll go if no one else has something. This is a quarantine that I did from actually a zine workshop. A couple. I'm trying to turn my screen off, but it's well. Oh, how about none here? It's a quarantine, and we had some prompts like the part of my life that has changed the most: living under lockdown, no gym, and the hardest part of living under lockdown, no real friends. Some things that give me joy is Skyping with my Carlos, and something new that I learned about myself during this time is I can organize and I can clean. And then what I miss about life pre-corona is going out to dinner and a show on the weekends in Echo Park. And the first thing I want to do post-corona is be in the pit at a rock concert, Korn. And then what gives me hope about the future, zebras. And that's my zine. So.
Yes, thank you. That was for what kind of zine workshop was that you took, Ziba?
Oh, it was called a quarantine workshop with Believer Mag, and it was done by the zinester Malik, or she's also a graphic novelist. So.
Awesome. I wanted to share maybe if some people are maybe considering what to share. I wanted to go over some of the events that we're going to be hosting in the next couple weeks. We'll have some flyers with specific descriptions and information really soon, but just keep in mind there's going to be and these will all be hosted by people who would have been exhibiting at LA Zine Fest 2020. There's going to be a workshop, comics and sketching for daily musings, how to draw people who are different from you, a panel talk, not another zine making assignment, using zines to teach under COVID-19 constraints, zines and inclusive queer expression, strategies for the production and release of a zine. And there'll also be a panel talk with photographers who recently put out a zine. We're also going to be putting out a compilation of, I guess it's an audio zine of people who are reading their work. as different tracks. Some of it has music set behind it, and we're going to be releasing that on Bandcamp. And we're doing some readings. So there'll be some really interesting stuff to participate in that I'll be free to participate in.
Where would that be on your website?
Yeah, so our handles, we'll pop them in the chat, but our Instagram is often where we put stuff, LA Zine Fest Instagram. Also our website, we'll have a page on there listing those that are coming up, and Facebook, Twitter, and a newsletter. So if you don't participate in social media, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we'll have that in there as well.
I also just wanted to jump in and mention that on our website, we'll also have a page dedicated to a digital art show. Usually when we have physical Zine Fest, we do have a gallery show featuring people who would be tabling at Zine Fest to showcase other ways they express themselves. And we're trying to create a new page. It'll just be known as the a digital art show, which will be live in the next few weeks, featuring art from exhibitors who would have been in Zine Fest 2020.
Christina, do you mean now or like later on?
Like later on, just because the one I'm working on, I think I still need to figure out how to fold and cut, but the one I'm working on, let me see if I can.
I also sent you an email, Christina, and you can send me photos of your zine later if you want, but we'd love to see them now too.
Okay, so I guess just going off like just also the quarantine, and like you guys kind of saw the first one, but it was just more of like thinking of like the graduation and how it might like be postponed and we just not sure about it. I just kind of wanted to like put it and even maybe make a further zine of that, of like the progression of where I've been and how I've gotten to where I'm going. And like that's supposed to be a Scrabble puzzle piece. I'm sorry, because my cousin was murdered, and he was one of the persons that like really pushed me, and I would share with him like my hopes and dreams, and every time I graduate, I just always want to commemorate him. And just like the heart, I wanted to write some words, but it's just kind of like I may be bruised, but I'm not broken, and I'm still on this path, and even if it's not being celebrated, it's happening and it's real. And it's just, yeah. I mean, I definitely would like to cut it and put it in like a form, but I'm really happy with like how it is, and I might just like tape it to my journal or something. But yeah, that was what I was working on, like. So.
That's very beautiful, Christina. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel like, you know, zines can be used as a healing tool a lot too without us realizing it. So I feel like I want to say thank you for your vulnerability, and I appreciate that you felt safe enough to share that with us. So just thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, I want to add like some kind of quotes, and I loved all the questions about quoting and all that, and I always feel like it's important to like share the source of where you got it, I mean, if it's something based on your own feelings and it's something that's being produced without any quotes, I don't know if it's like necessary, but I think if you're gonna directly quote, like it's good to give credit. And I mean, it's just nice to be able to like release some of what you feel and hear that sometimes other people resonate or like might feel the same way and get some kind of share like a feeling through just a couple little pages.
So yeah, I didn't do much with color, but I definitely started out with the zine quarantine. And the way I've kind of been feeling is like very cloudy and just sort of, you know, lots of space everywhere. And so I noticed, and then I wrote a poem, which I don't want to read necessarily, but just also like a lot of nature and just sort of, hey, is it summer yet? No, it's still spring. Like just a lot of things that came up for me, I guess, were nature and like I was wanting to draw a lot of clouds and like empty space because that's kind of how I'm feeling right now.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to share? Are there any like closing questions that anyone might have, or last minute thoughts or something like that?
I think I just wanted to share that I don't know, this experience, I was a little nervous about a zine workshop that would take place digitally like this, but I think I kind of want to do like more of them because I'm just feeling like, you know, even just learning these new ways of connecting with one another, these new forms of intimacy, these new like connections to ourselves and each other. Zines have always provided that in a face-to-face environment, and I think it's really interesting to see how powerful that it can still be in this type of situation that we're all navigating, because we all have this one thing that we're sharing at this time. And I really value documenting things and archiving, but also letting go. So I might make a zine and then just maybe burn it, say goodbye to it safely. So yeah, this has been really good. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who decided to be a part of this. And yeah,
I am muted. Sorry, I unmuted and my partner didn't know. But I just wanted to say thank you once again, and I really do hope that we continue to host these kinds of workshops at Cal State L.A. I want to thank the librarians and all the artists and for your brilliant work. I just wanted to say that I think, especially because Los Angeles is so hard to get around in, this virtual aspect, while it doesn't have the human connection in the same way, I think it makes it more accessible. And so I really do look forward to many more of these. Of course, once quarantine is over, it would be great to see folks in person, but I don't know that I would have made the time to go in the busy week, especially if I'm not teaching, I'm not even on campus. And I think that's the case for many of our students. So yes, please continue to offer these opportunities. Thank you so much.
That's such a good point, such an important point. Thank you for sharing that.
Does everyone have my email address to send virtual copies, if you'd like, totally voluntary, of your zines? I'll drop it one more time in the chat box. I just want to make sure you all can see the chat.
Just a reminder that several of us don't have the chat, or at least I don't. So if you shared any resources, if you can send them to the participants, that would be great. And also, if you're willing to share the recording, I don't know if you're willing to do that. I would love to share it with my other students. But since we didn't say that in advance, I understand if you can't.
I do have Christina's email address, and Anita, we can get yours from Kendall. Yvonne, do you have access to the chat?
Yes, I do.
If you'd like to receive emails about this after this, feel free to send me your email address. Thank you, Tiffany. That's my email address.
Really good thinking, Tiffany.
That's the correct spelling, right, Peja?
Yes, well
Okay.
done. It is a feat.
I misspell my own name. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really. That was a joke, just so everyone knows. I know how to spell my own name. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take this off because if you don't have it, let me know. I drew an eagle from Animal Crossing. That was my last thing because that's what I've been doing. So he's a little angry. I tried to draw the raccoon, but he looked really sad. So I don't know.
I loved those.
They might go in a window somewhere for a while. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Anita said, that this was really great, and I really appreciate everyone sharing. And I think, like, I helped a little bit, mainly Azalea and Peja. So thank you, Azalea and Peja. But this was nice for me also to just draw and kind of relax for a few minutes. So thank you all a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed being read to also. That was nice. All right, well, I guess we have 2 minutes left. Is there anything else LA Zine Fest or anyone else would like to share? And if not, then we can just wrap it up.
Daisy, Roxy, anything from you?
I just want to say thank you so much for letting us conduct this workshop with you. It was a really great opportunity and a really nice experience on my part.
Yeah, I also want to. Oh, sorry, Daisy. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you. I really love doing workshops. I love zines. I just love them so much, and I'm always really excited to talk about them and share and connect in this way with people. So thank you for giving us space and the opportunity to do it, especially right now. Because Lord knows we're all going a little nuts with Rona. She's making us crazy.
Yeah, just another thank you from me, and thank you for the moments where we're pushed to do better, be more accessible, and think of ways of being resilient and adapting and acknowledging the significance of this moment in really positive ways. So thank you for your time and your energy and your presence.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, LA Zine Fest. Thanks so much to our guests for attending. And hopefully we'll do another Zine workshop sometime, and I'll see you there.